Welcome to Haunt Tech Tips, the source for technical advice to take your haunted attraction to the next level. Here's your host, Chris Gay.
Welcome back, everyone. This week's episode is all about audio systems for your haunted attraction. So there's a huge gamut of various systems you can use, ranging from tiny little Bluetooth speakers up to full distributed audio 70-volt systems, commercial systems truly. So we'll start small and work our way big. Small Bluetooth speakers. There's a lot to be said for these for point source audio. You're not going to fill a room with it, but if you have a prop, if you have a set piece, per se you have a old-timey radio and you want to play a old-timey music or something out of it and the radio doesn't work, there you go. You can put a Bluetooth speaker behind it or even a hardwire speaker. Any small, inexpensive, ideally wall-powered speaker, although battery speakers work. Not everyone has power at their haunt. And that will give you a nice point source audio. With these, of course, the better the speaker, the better the sound, and you'll get what you pay for. There are battery-powered Jobsite radios. You'll see these from DeWalt. Ryobi makes a nice one. These put out a little bit more volume than your typical Bluetooth speaker. And advantage to these is they are tool battery powered. And of course you have tools to build your haunt. You can always look at the tools you have, use compatible batteries. And it's a good way to have a battery powered device without the expense of a bunch of AA's, AAA's, C's, D's, whatever you'd be using otherwise. And some of these, since they're made for job sites, they have some volume to them. Some are Bluetooth, some are direct aux, some even have a USB in. There's various ones out there. Now, getting away from point source or lower quality audio, a fix I like to use for single room systems is a simple 2.1 channel PC speaker system. Logitech makes a lot of these. You can even find these at Goodwill sometimes. Although the caveat here is the 2.1. Point 1 means it has a subwoofer, obviously two speakers, left and right channel. These are typically a 1/8" audio input, so a headphone type cord. Some of them do have RCA, your red and white plugs that used to plug into TVs back in the day. These usually have decent audio. It's not going to fill a large room. It's not going to have a ton of volume, but it will do decent audio for a room, for music, for a video effect, for just ambiance, anything of that nature. These do a decent job. Outdoors are not going to work, and if there's chainsaws, they're not going to work over that. But in a funeral parlor scene, in a old-timey living room, kitchen, dining room, whatever, you can get some decent quality audio out of these. And they're relatively inexpensive. Even new, they're usually between $30 to $50 depending on the wattage that you get. And usually more wattage means more volume, but not always. You just got to be careful there. Some of these are USB powered. I would stay away from that and stay with ones that plug into a wall outlet just because they have some more power to work with. If you're a trail haunt or have just a large outdoor area, car audio speakers are another very viable option. And not only the speakers, but the amplifier is really what you're looking at here, because it runs off a 12-volt DC, so you can use car batteries or really any battery array that runs on 12 volts and has some capacity to it. With this, you can get into solar charging, you can get into generator charging, so on and so forth. That's more for another episode. But if you have a car battery, I like using marine boxes so you can keep your electronics secure inside. A amplifier for a car or boat. Boat ones work great because they're marine grade. They're meant to be splashed with some water. That can do some power amplification for outdoor areas. Car speakers, you have to keep in mind, are meant to go inside of a car door to act as a reverb chamber, basically. Speakers, long story short, they move air front and back, and they're designed to be placed in a cabinet, in a car door, or if they are in their own enclosure, they're designed to be standalone. So don't just sit a car speaker out, but there are outdoor speakers and whatnot you can hook up to these. So very valid option, and you can get car audio receivers for $20-$30. Marine stuff, double the price, but that's the price of marine and waterproof. Another unique option, if you have a scene permissive of such, you can use actual media players that fit the context of the scene, be it an old record player, be it a piano, organ. We actually picked up a electronic organ last year for our show, and it had an input for a auto player on top. The auto player was kind of neat. You could put it way out of tone, out of phase, and make it sound creepy. But at the same time, with some adapters, you could hook up an MP3 player to it and have the organ speaker play music. So there's some neat opportunities there. Again, these are point source devices, but it can really make a scene if you have an old-timey radio playing an old-timey radio broadcast of a zombie emergency or something like that on the news. Further, getting away from point speakers and into a larger area, active DJ speakers are huge for haunts. We use several of them throughout for scenes, for the queue line area, just to keep people entertained, and for the, let's say, the gift shop / concession area at the end, again for entertainment. Active DJ speakers, there's very simple. You plug it into power, plug in your media, and you're good to go. The amplifier is built into every single speaker in an active speaker scenario. They oftentimes, the newer ones actually have SD card slots or USB card slots. So you don't even have to have a media player. The speaker is a media player. And in a looping scenario, this is ideal in that you can put your audio, your music, whatever, into the speaker, set it on loop, and as soon as you power up, it'll fire up and just start going. That works great. Passive DJ speakers, that's a little bit more tricky because you have to have an amplifier for these. So the speakers are much cheaper. Don't fall into that trap thinking, oh, DJ speakers, these are great. They're cheap. Not necessarily, because now you need an amplifier. And some amplifiers can be had for around $100. Not saying those are the best amplifiers, but they are amplifiers. And some of those also have the SD card slots, USB card slots, as well as, of course, plenty of other inputs for your RCA, for your headphone, for your 1/4 inch, XLR, so on and so forth. This is one of the more complicated options because you do need to match your speakers to your amplifier, and frankly, it's several components to hide within a scene. However, if this is what you have, it is a viable option. Going slightly larger still, there are commercial systems, and there's passive commercial systems that use your standard 4 8-ohm speakers. Ohms being the resistance in a speaker. Typically, a 4-ohm speaker would be a very large, high-power speaker. 8-ohm speaker is your more typical bookshelf speaker, in-ceiling speaker, in-wall speaker. But they can be ordered to whatever you'd like. Just make sure that you match your ohms and wattage to your amplifier. There are distributed audio systems out there where one amplifier will put out different sources to various different speakers. These speakers are divided up into zones, and the different zones can have different sources and different volume levels. This is potentially huge if you have a indoor haunted attraction that's not too large, because you could have each room running from a main control center, and then also have the ability that if there's an emergency, you have the quote-unquote God mic, so you can tell everyone this is an emergency, please call me and evacuate, so on and so forth. These systems do come at a premium price, however, but for larger commercial venues, they're definitely a huge option. For the home haunter, surround sound systems have come a long way. Some newer surround sounds also have multiple zones. Usually it's just 2, sometimes there's 3 or 4, and they can put out, again, different sources at different volume levels to the separate zones. For very large haunts, those in commercial buildings, those outdoors, any that just have a large area to cover with a single audio source, there are 70 volt systems, which is a special type of amplifier. that instead of your typical speaker level output, puts out a 70 volt audio signal, which travels huge distances, about 10 times further than your conventional audio system. Unfortunately, these require special speakers. If you hook up a conventional speaker without a transformer in it to a 70 volt system, you're going to have a light show. Briefly, sparks, probably some smoke, maybe some fire. Don't do it. Be careful with this. The advantage of these 70 volt systems, per se you have a large outdoor queue line area. Per se it's a large queue line just to get in. These will usually only play one zone, one output. However, the speakers can be daisy chained. They have taps on the speaker, so you can change the volume per speaker. You could have music in your bathroom even if you wanted, the same thing as you have in the queue line area. But obviously it'll be louder in the queue line area with a lot of people talking that will be in the restroom or the office, etc. These systems also allow paging. And you could even run these out into your parking lot if you wanted to. Inside of a show, unless you want to have the same music throughout, probably not the most viable system, but definitely for large outdoor screen park type locations, any large commercial situation, these are huge. So with these different type of speakers, and especially the commercial speakers, DJ speakers, there are different types of connectors. XLR is your common microphone cable that has 3, 5, or 7 pins. 3 is most common. 5 and 7 are usually specialty or a little bit older. XLR cable is preferable in that it is a balanced cable, meaning that there's a ground cable inside of it, and there's 2 other cables that each carry audio signals. It carries them out of phase. Once they get to the other end, they're put back into phase, and interference is filtered out by that process. Long and complicated, but long story short, you can have a long XLR run, and radio interference, phone interference, even power interference from wires next to it won't affect your audio quality nearly as much as it will with a 1/4 inch or RCA cable. 1/4 inch, that's your typical single plug. You used to have these on older headphones, still new DJ headphones use these. It's fine for very short cables. You'll see these on instruments, but usually it just goes from an instrument straight into a pedal or into a mixer on stage, which is no more than a few feet away. The reason for this, there's no balancing there, so these can pick up interference over any long distance. RCA, that's your standard television cable, the yellow, red, and white. Yellow doesn't do much for us in an audio situation, although you can if you need to. But the red and white side of that carry the audio. Again, these are just tip and ring, meaning inner core, outer shielding, and they will pick up interference over long runs, but you will see these in 100-foot cables, 150-foot cables, but if you ever listen to a speaker that has a 100-foot RCA cable to it, you're going to hear fuzz and static in the background. It's just going to happen. Speak-on is another type of connector. These are typically going to be on your passive DJ type speakers because this is a connector that's meant to be carrying some power behind it. It's a DJ connector, a commercial audio connector, and it's usually plastic, locks in place. The locking feature is nice. The XLR has a lock on it as well. It's usually just a tab lock, where Speak-on is kind of a twist lock. It's a little bit more secure. But you'll probably not be seeing Speak-on connectors in a haunt situation unless, again, you have a very large, very powerful commercial type system. Beyond that, speakers have different ratings. There's different types of speakers. We'll get into that a little bit more in a later episode because there are tons of speakers out there. There's in-wall, in-ceiling. There's wall-based speakers that actually look like it is just the wall, so it turns a flat wall into a speaker that you can't see. Those have some neat applications for haunting. I've not worked with them personally, but I've seen them pushed at Home Depot and Lowe's. They're out there. There's built-into shelf speakers. There are light bulb speakers. The standard in-wall and ceiling speakers, there's different materials they're made out of: paper, plastic, graphite, titanium, Kevlar. And each of those has obviously different price points, different advantages, different disadvantages. Further, The other main type of speaker I've not spoken about yet is the subwoofer, and there's also the transducer. Subwoofers are huge for haunting, which I did mention that in the 2.1 audio system, the PC speakers, because the subwoofer is where your bass comes from. And bass is where you get that gut feeling, that presence of audio. You're not just hearing something, but now you're feeling it. And that goes a long way in making an environment feel more real. You're not walking by hearing something coming out of a cheap Bluetooth speaker or coming out of a phone. You're feeling that thump. You're just have that feeling in your stomach that comes along with that pressure wave that only a subwoofer can really push out, or a large DJ speaker. Some of those do have some decent bass ranges on them. Transducers, that gets really interesting. There's one, I've seen it out there before, it's called the ButtKicker. Mounts to the floor, actually, bolts right to the floor. And it uses, similar to a speaker technology, where you're moving a cone back and forth, but instead of moving the cone, it is actually shaking the floor. These at very low frequency make a extremely uneasy feeling, and short of getting into the audiology of it, at the right frequency you can't hear it, but you can sense it and your body can feel it. If you crank it up a little bit, however, you can really shake a room. It's going to sound crazy, and you'll get some interesting scares out of this. These have a lot of applications on top of platforms. If per se have an elevator setup or a electric chair setup, anything of that nature. Most people haven't experienced these before, so there's a lot of potential there, and I hope to be doing some videos on those in the near future. So that is a very surface level overview of audio, and as you can tell, you can start out with a $20, $30 Bluetooth speaker or PC speaker system and get your point audio or your room audio done that way. But there's really, the sky's the limit here. If you're a commercial haunt with distributed audio, with 70 volt audio, there's a lot you can do here. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'm happy to help out with guiding you and your haunt in which direction you should go. Also, there's tons of products out there. I can make recommendations, but it's always changing. Something huge and new, not even that new, line array speakers from Bose, if you've seen these. The subwoofer is not large at all, maybe twice the size of a bowling ball. Large watermelon sits on the ground. There's a stick that comes out of it that's about the diameter of 3-inch pipe, and within that, there are 6, 8, 12 small speakers that, when added together, can fill a room. So there's tons of new technology coming out all the time. There's even line array speaker tape that was just now shown at a major audio show. Long story short, you can put this along the front of a stage and have a line array speaker that isn't even visible because it's literally 3-inch wide, 2-inch deep tape that is full of speakers. So again, feel free to reach out. Have any questions, comments, concerns? I'm more than happy to help. Check the show notes, and there will be a few different resources for different types of speakers, the XLR cables, the 1/4-inch, RCA, and just a basic primer. Need more help? Reach out.
Thanks for listening. Go to haunttechtips.com for show notes and more.